I fell back a few steps. "Turn around, Rohit," my heart pleaded as I watched the two figures run on. "Wait for me, my love," my heart wailed. My eyes were still yearning after them when I saw Mayuri slow down a bit. She lagged behind a minute, and then, before I could blink, she moved to the left of Rohit and took my place. First I was horrified, then I was enraged. Images from my childhood flashed across my mind. I always had a place reserved for me at the dinner table at home. No one dared to occupy that place. I would not eat dinner if I had to sit elsewhere at the table. Once my cousin had teasingly made a dash from my chair. Provoked, I had swiftly pulled away the chair from under him. He had landed with a thump on the floor, hurting his back. My father had struck me hard across the cheek and demanded that I apologize to him. I had stoutly refused and retorted, "He deserves it," and then marched out of the room with my hand on my smarting cheek. Now, as I watched the two figures running, my anger powered my failing energy as always. Mayuri had taken my place. I rightfully belonged there. I suddenly felt a surge of strength fill me up as if my feet were ignited. I bolted ahead like an arrow just released from its bow and headed straight into Mayuri's back. A shrill scream pierced the air. At the end of 2 excruciating minutes, Mayuri and I were lying in a crumpled heap on the red mud. Her twisted leg lay pinned under my chest. The skin on her arms and legs were torn apart in nasty bruises. The taste of blood mixed with mud trickled down my throat. My lips were badly bruised. "What have you done?" I heard Rohit holler out as he roughly grabbed my arm and pulled me up to my feet. He dropped to his knees beside Mayuri and slowly turned her over. Her face was contorted in pain. He slowly supported her into a sitting position. "All okay?" concerned runners called out as they sped past us. "Yeah, just a small mishap," Rohit responded. I felt his dark gaze on me. "You bitch," he said menacingly. "You jealous bitch," he repeated. Rohit, Mayuri's voice faltered. It was an accident, not her fault." "No, it was not," Rohit spat. "I know her too well. She did it deliberately." He barked and turned away from me. I stood quietly watching him as he helped Mayuri to her feet. He slid his arm around her waist. Then he lifted her arm and put it around his shoulder. Together they started walking away into the forest. My eyes stung as I stood absolutely still, watching them till they faded in my vision. I opened my mouth to call out to Rohit, but I heard no voice. My hands went up to my cheek. I was appalled. Tears. I was crying. I couldn't bear that. I started tugging at my head in desperation. "Rachna, Rachna, what the heck are you doing?" the voice demanded. I felt a strong hand on my arm, shaking me vigorously. I looked up dazed at Rohit's worried face. "Rachna, what are you doing?" he asked. "Why are you pulling your hair and you're crying?" "Are you all right?" Mayuri was asking. "Oh yes," I managed to smile. "It's just the dust hurting my eyes," I said, standing up from the tree stump on which I had been sitting, waiting for the announcement, asking us to move into the holding area 5 minutes before the start of the marathon. In silence, we walked to the starting zone. A few seconds later, I heard the gunshot.
That's when I decided to kill Rohit.
Part 4. Anuradha, Landaur, Mussoorie. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was only 11:30 in the morning, but my eyelids were refusing to stay open. I had been writing since 5 o'clock in the morning. Maybe it would be a good idea to take a nap and then resume writing. Avnit had stepped out of the house on some work. If I oversleep, he will wake me up, I reassured myself. I came over to the bed, pumped up the pillows and lay down. When I opened my eyes, the room was dark. It took a few moments for my eyes to get adjusted to the darkness. I realized there was some light in the room. I turned towards the light coming from the direction of my desk. The table lamp was aglow. I saw Avnit standing at my desk, his back to me. I narrowed my gaze to focus better. I saw him scuffling through my papers. I groaned as I moved up into a sitting position. He spun around. Oh, you're up at last," he smiled as he walked towards me. "You know how long you've been sleeping?" he teased. "What's the time?" I mumbled. "6 in the evening," he said. "Oh," I explained, my eyes wide open. "I'm so hungry," I cribbed as I got out of bed and walked towards the bathroom. "You freshen up and we'll get you something to eat, honey," Avnit called out from the door. 10 minutes later, I was devouring a bowl of hot soup and some toast with butter. We were sitting in the garden, the cool breeze was refreshing and brought alive my dormant spirit. Avnit sat across the table sipping his tea. "Were you looking for something on my desk?" I asked Avnit, trying hard to make it sound nothing more than a casual remark. "No," he said, I came up to switch on the table lamp so that your room would not be so dark when you woke up. I saw some papers lying on the chair, so I just gathered them all up and stacked them," he explained. "Check them out, I may not have put them in the right order," he cautioned as an afterthought. The next evening, after a long session of writing, I got up from my desk, stretched myself and walked over to the windowsill. I stood still. Down in the garden, seated around the table, were Vedika and Avnit. "Oh, she's back," I thought spitefully. I covered myself in the folds of the curtain so as not to be seen by them. There was a pile of papers on the table. Both were engaged in deep conversation. Then Avnit pushed his chair away and stood up. He extended his hand towards her. She too stood up and took his hand. I saw them smile at each other as their hands remained locked. Vedika then picked up the piles of papers and both of them walked towards the car. Avnit held the door open for her as she sat. He then walked around, pulled open the door, slid behind the wheel, and they were off. I stood transfixed. But my mind was racing. I walked back to my desk and let my mind put the pieces together. Images from last evening played across my mind. When I had woken up and found Avnit shuffling papers on my desk, I held my breath. Had he really been arranging the papers? How often earlier had he done that, my mind asked bluntly. Then there was this silly stubbornness about not wanting to know anything about the book. Was that a cover-up? My mind insisted that I think on those lines. Why did Vedika visit today? What had they been discussing? A book idea? My story idea? Could Vedika's visits be mere coincidences? My mind warned me, coincidences are incidences co-joined strategically. Only a fool would brush them aside. I was short of breath. My lungs were bursting. I felt dizzy. I was like a lone trekker who, after days and nights of a treacherous and arduous climb, withstanding nature's wrath, finally sees her destination looming ahead, only to realize seconds later that it was only a mirage. Because between her and her destination lies a deep, dark chasm, something that was left out of her trail map, the printer's devil. The only way out was to return to the base. My mind screamed, Avnit is a thief. His modus operandi made me sick but angry. He had first plundered my heart and then stole my idea. All this for his woman Vedika. It was all so clear I was a fool. Lone men are not to be trusted, Captain Mera. I scoffed aloud. The ringing phone burst into my thoughts. Hi Ashok, I said. Yes, I'm almost done. I can hand over the manuscript to you tomorrow, I added happily. And now that I've finished writing, maybe I can take a break and go to Mussoorie after all, I exclaimed gleefully. I hung up. I sat staring at my notebook in front of me. A few moments passed. Then I pulled up my hair and twisted it into a bun at the top of my head. I picked up my pen and wrote with vengeance.
That's when I decided to kill Avnit.
Part 5, Shakti. On the sets of a film, a beautiful location, the film is directed by Shakti. Good morning, I called out as I entered the set. A chorus of good mornings greeted me. I looked around the set. Where's Neeraj? I asked. Karthik walked up to me and said, Neeraj is unwell, he'll probably come in later. Oh, strange, he didn't inform me, I said, shrugging my shoulders. Well, it was early morning when he called me. I told him not to bother you. Karthik replied matter-of-factly. Who's the boss? I wanted to ask. Instead, I smiled at Karthik and said, well, that's Okay? But it was not one bit okay. I didn't approve of this. Anyway, I let it pass. A couple of shots later, post-lines, we were ready to roll out the next scene. The boatman and Karthik were to be having a conversation. The lighting was just perfect, the angle great. I completely liked what I saw through my camera lens. Lights, camera, action, I called out as the clapper boy did his job. Shakti, wait, Karthik shouted, his hand signaling me to stop. I straightened myself above the camera and looked at him. Karthik walked towards me. A couple of other guys joined him. Shakti, I think it would be better if the boatman is seated during the conversation. Otherwise, I have to look up so high, he said. I stared at him. I couldn't believe my ears. No one had ever dared to do this before. I didn't like it at all, but I let it pass. What do you think? Karthik was asking the other guys. I suddenly didn't remember their names. Good idea, very good, one of them said a little too enthusiastically, while the others nodded profusely. Look, let's do one thing. Karthik was speaking again. Vipul, you go and take my position. Ask the boatman to sit. Shakti and I will decide from here. Vipul walked off without a glance at me. Who's the boss? I wanted to scream, but I let it pass. Karthik assumed position behind the camera. He looked into the lens. From the next couple of minutes, I heard him shout out instructions. Vipul, move a little more to your right. No, not the boatman. You a bit more. Okay, now talk something, anything. Perfect. He turned to me. Shakti, take a look, he said, stepping aside to make place for me. I looked into the lens. I saw nothing. It was all a blur. May I? Karthik's hands on my shoulders gently pulled me away from the camera. Vipul, Karthik shouted, still looking through the lens. A little more to the right. No, not so much. Yes. Absolutely perfect. He turned to me, his face flushed with excitement. Shoot me now, sweetheart, he said, and started walking back to take his place from Vipul. A thunderous applause from the onlookers accompanied him as he strode proudly across the floor. Lights, camera, action. The sound of my own voice startled me. I looked up at the ceiling above my bed. The images were now a blotch of grey. I sat up in bed. My throat was parched. I reached out for the bottle of mineral water on my bedside table. I sipped the water little by little, allowing the water to wet the insides of my mouth before letting it trickle down my dry throat. I recalled my PEEP principle in life. You need to modify it slightly, Shakti, I told myself. Rather than a place for everything and everything in its place, it should now be PEEP, a place for everyone and everyone in their place.
That's when I decided to kill Karthik.
Part 6, the ashram. It was a long, enduring session. Anjali spoke continuously and tirelessly. Dr. Ganguly sat motionless through the entire narration. Often he felt the need to hold his breath, lest he broke her flow.
So you see, I didn't kill anyone. But I know all about the murders. I feel so terrible.
Why did they tell you all this?
They told me. I don't remember. You don't believe me?
Dr. Ganguly continued to look at her without speaking.
So let's put our hands together,
Incognito.
very specially for Tom Alter and to the author Lata for that wonderful rendition. Of course, Lata, we all know, most of us behind you, that you're very fond of marathons. But of course, Tom has put us to a cheerful marathon of theatre. Cheers to that. Thank you so much,
I have to add a personal note to this. When I was reading this book, the 4 characters you've just heard, with 3 of the characters, there was such a connection that I was absolutely stunned. I said, "Kahin, main isme incognito to nahi hu." The setting in Mussoorie, my friend Chandar is right here. Lata writes about a section of Mussoorie called Landauer, which is where I was born. And she talks about the Dukan, the area called Char Dukan in the church, Well, that's the church where I was married and where my son was just married. And she's writing about this. I was like, I got goosebumps. Then there's a section